All right, folks. Once again, welcome to this brief seminar on storyline and accessibility. We are going to be looking at what it's going to take to make your courses WCAG 2.0 compliant. I'm going to be showing you some of the highlights of some of the stuff that you have to do in order to make sure that your courses are going to be compliant. Just start off our little slide deck here. All right. So my name is Mike Daw, and I am the senior e-learning instructor here at Eliquo. Tell you a little bit about ourselves if you don't already know us. Eliquo, you can find us at eliquo.ca, and we're a training organization. We also do production and consultation. This brief seminar is basically going to be a quick overview of one of our more in-depth courses on making e-learning courses accessible. Under our e-learning banner, we cover pretty much all of the theory behind creating e-learning, including some unique stuff you're not going to find elsewhere, such as e-learning and accessibility, specifically from a theoretical standpoint, but also looking at some of the tools and how to make them accessible as well. This particular seminar is going to be a quick look at the e-learning with Articulate storyline, specifically on how to make it accessible. If you got any questions about any of the courses we offer, please feel free to contact us at support@eliquo.ca. All right, so let's talk a little bit about Articulate storyline. Now, one of the things that you need to bear in mind when we're discussing storyline is that this product has been around for quite a while now. Matter of fact, version 2, though, just came out a little while ago. It actually just came out back in September of last year, so it's a little over a year old. There's a lot of reasons to love storyline. Articulate's done a wonderful job at creating a really easy to use e-learning development tool. I'm particularly fond of the layers and the interactions with the triggers, and don't tell anybody, but I even like the characters that they provide and all the different poses you can put them in to kind of generate a little more interest and interactivity in your e-learning course. One of the challenges that Articulate faced, though, when looking at its competitors, especially competitors such as Adobe's Captivate or Lectora's Inspire, the approach to accessibility was left a little bit wanting until, that is, May of this year, when they came out with Update 5. Update 5 was a major enhancement to Articulate storyline, and version 2 specifically, and they targeted accessibility. They got 8 key accessibility enhancements that they brought in for Storyline 5. I'm just going to pop open the actual page so you guys can see pretty much the Articulate storyline history. They've actually gone through quite a bit of, here it is here. Major update 5. You can see here that they've added support for for WCAG in May. They added custom tab order, which was a big one. The ability to skip player navigation, another interesting one. A feature to adjust the player font size up to 200%. Now, this is an interesting one. We're actually going to look into this one a little more deeply and see what that's really all about. Language identifiers, keyboard support. Adjusting player background control, screen reader support. So they've done quite a bit of enhancement when it comes to accessibility. Plus, over 100 bug fixes in this one release alone. Now, we're currently on Update 7, but those have not been specifically targeted towards accessibility. The accessibility target, that was done in in May of last year. Essentially, one of the things that they're telling us is that with the release of Update 5, Storylines Flash Output is now compliant with WCAG 2.0. And that is correct from a certain perspective. You have to kind of look at it a little more closely. When you look at what they're actually saying, I'll bring up the page again. This is where you see it here. The first thing I want to bring out is WCAG is supported in Flash output only. I'll bring that back up again, plus a couple more interesting details in terms of restrictions as to how to actually get access to the accessibility of Articulate Storyline. What they've provided us with is a chart that outlines every one of the A and AA criteria under WCAG 2.0, and then tells us one of two things. Either it's supported, that is, that the software allows for this to be this particular criteria to be fulfilled, or author controlled, meaning that the responsibility for creating the accessibility rests mainly or wholly with the author. There is only one not applicable guideline, and that is the live captions, which is pretty clear to understand why. It's not really what Articulate is all about. Articulate Storyline is all about. What I want to do is I want to go through some of these, just do a bit of a highlight touch on some of these statements about their level of support, and look at kind of the mechanics as to how we would use them and some of the things that we would need to keep in mind when we're trying to make Articulate Storyline 2.0 stories supported. There are a few caveats there. There are a few restrictions. First of all, it is the Flash-based only output which is supported. So only the Flash-based output is supported in terms of accessibility. That means the HTML5 output and the mobile player output are not currently compliant with the accessibility guidelines. And another caveat, you've probably already read this, is that the accessibility for Articulate Storyline is only supported through JAWS 16 and later when using Internet Explorer 11 and later. That means NVDA, Window Eyes are not supported. Firefox, Chrome also not supported. It is this combination of two specific tools in a Flash-based output which take advantage of the accessibility options in Articulate Storyline. Hopefully this doesn't come as a surprise to too many of you. But let's just dig right in. We're going to start with one of the things that they added recently, and that is the idea of metadata. You now have the ability to create a title. Now, the interpretation of this particular criterion is that the pages must have titles that describe the topic or purpose. Now, what Articulate says is that this is in fact author controlled. What I wanted to point out is that while the project can be titled, I'm going to show you how to do that in just a second, there's currently no mechanism to programmatically identify the title of individual slides or sections. If your slide needs a title, you're going to need to make sure that it is the first thing that is in the tab order or the reading order on the slide. So I'm going to pop Articulate Storyline 2 up here and put it on the screen. And there we go. And now with Articulate Storyline currently on the screen, there we are, that's better. I'm going to go look at some of the options for titles. So one of the places where we can start playing with the title is in the player setup. So I'm going to jump over to the player setup here. And in the player setup, there we go. In the player setup, I can come in and add the title of my project right here under the Features menu. So you can jump in here and add the title of your project. You also, I'm going to cancel out of this, you also have the option in the Publish window of including a title. So make sure that the title is present in both places. Now, if you've saved your story, you'll see my story here is Acing the Interview. If you've saved your story, that title should be automatically placed in both of those areas. But it's a good idea to double check to make sure that the title is accurate. Sometimes we'll use, instead of the name of the project, we'll use some code or some numbering system to name our projects, which really won't have very much meaning to most of the people who are taking our courses. So again, make sure that those two titles get updated whenever you need to. So that's the first thing. You're going to get your titles updated. Now, if, on the other hand, I need a title for a slide, I'm going to have to make sure that that title is the first object in the slide that gets read. And we'll talk about tab order in just a few minutes. But the first object that gets read, there is no specific title box. Now, even though, if I were to go into, let's jump over here, I'm going to create a new slide, and let's select a basic layout slide with title and content. This title box is just a text box that has been borrowed or copied from the master slide. It has no programmatic tagging. This isn't like an H1 in a PDF or an HTML page. It's just a text box. So its indication as a title has to be in terms of position. I don't need this anymore, so I'm just going to delete that slide out of here. So that's titling, and there's a sneak peek of our Acing the Interview. And I wanted to skip right up to our next slide here, which is going to be dealing with the language metadata requirements. This is another piece of metadata that Storyline 2 has kind of allowed us to get access to. Now, the language of the page, they've interpreted it as being the language of the project. So the language of the project can be set programmatically within the project itself. As far as the other AA requirement, the language of parts, WCAG requires that any language that is different from the language of the main document also be tagged. Articulate says this is author controlled. Technically, they are correct, but what this actually means is by author controlled, it means that you cannot use any second languages in your Articulate Storyline e-learning project. Storyline does not support the ability to tag an object as having a language different from the language of the main project. So while you can satisfy A by setting the language, and I'm going to show you how to do that, if you have a different language, there is no way of satisfying 3.1.2, the language of parts. So in that case, you're going to actually have to tie yourself down and say just one language. Now, setting the language is actually also very easy. It's something we'll also do in the player, and we'll pop over to, this time, the text labels in the player, and this is where we'll identify the language. The language here will affect not only the language that is given to the project, but also the language of, let's say if I select French here, it'll affect the language of the actual custom text that we're going to see pop up through our buttons and our automatic tagging. So it's both a way of fixing the buttons themselves and to fix the default language. Moving right along, custom color contrast. Fully supported because it is fully author controlled. This one is up to you guys as authors to make sure that the text and objects that you select and that you put into your project meet your color contrast requirements. Now, that being said, You can also control the color contrast of the player. And again, we're going to jump back to the player controls here. And this time we're going to look at the colors and effects. And under the colors of effects, this is where you can work with the color scheme. You can start working with things like, say, a forest green, or pick a color you like. One thing you have to be careful, though, is with some of these color schemes, the color contrast is insufficient. So just because it's a template here doesn't mean it will actually meet WCAG requirements. If you want to do any editing, you can come in here and do some advanced editing and change the colors. Again, bearing in mind your 4.5:1 for small text, 3:1 for large text color requirements. I'm going to pop back over to our slide deck here. Next thing I wanted to look at is the idea of font size. Now, font size, this is an interesting one for me, and it actually caused a little bit of consternation when we read this. The reason being that the requirement from WCAG 1.4.4 is that the text can be resized without any assistive technology. Now, the assumption that is being made here is that the text can be resized by the user as they wish. There is a capacity to increase the text if a user finds it too small. Articulate says that this is author controlled, and they are correct in that the author can set the font size for slide text and player controls. But you have to be careful, because this is something you have to build in. You can't just count on putting up large text. That's not the intent of the guideline. The intent of the guideline is the resizing of text. So if I go into my my player properties here, you'll see down in the player text size, I can actually increase this size up to 200% of normal. However, once this is set, it's fixed. The user has zero control over the actual size. So that's not actually meeting the requirement in the resizability of the text. Now, options that you can include here would be to create two versions of the project, one with 200%, one with 100%, and allowing your user to select the version they want before they even open the course. We're going to look at the actual requirement for resizing text itself in just a few minutes. Focus order is an interesting one, and this is something that they've added, and it's great. I'm really, really happy to see it. One caveat here, guys. This only works in Internet Explorer. It will not function in Chrome, and it will not function in Firefox. You're going to have to make sure that you're using, or that you're indicating to your users that they need to use Internet Explorer for accessibility purposes, with, if they need JAWS, with JAWS version 16 or better. So one of the things you got to watch when you're working with the focus order is layers. Now, layers can be included in your focus order. I'm going to go back to my story view here and open the tab order, here. I'm going to pop over to this particular slide, and I've got some buttons here for adding a little bit of interactivity, and those buttons open some slides for me. And so in order to make sure that I am fully accessible in terms of tab order here, I'm going to have to open up the Customize Tab Order window. So I'm going to pop that open. And you can see I've got quite a few objects here, and all of the objects from the different layers are also present. The actual best way to do this is to go to Create Custom Tab Order, and then set the tab order in the order in which things should appear. So you can see here that I have my question 1 text box appears right after all the buttons have been read. So I'm going to grab that, and I'm going to use these arrows to move that back up. And so now I'm going to get the first title. Well, it's not going to be exactly first. And then you've prepared, how should you respond, and then my 4 buttons in order. Now, there's a couple of pieces here that come from the slide master, and I really don't need to see these. So I'm going to, for this part here, I'm going to just, the slide master itself, I'm going to bring those and I'm going to move those down to the very bottom of my list to make them the last thing we click on. And then we have to start talking about the responses. So here my responses, I've got 4 objects here. I've got a rectangle, which is going to be kind of the background, and I don't even want that red. I don't want it noticed by my screen reader, so I'm going to click the trash can here, and that removes it from the reading order. And then I've got my 4 boxes here that are going to be red. Now, in order to make sure that these are accessible in the right order, I have to place them under the activity which triggers that layer. In this case, it's going to be button 1. So in order to read them correctly, I'm going to bring these down into the right order so that when I tab through, there we go, response 2, that one's the wrong one, so I'm going to move that one down 1 here. And there's my response 1. So I've got text box 1, text box 2, text box 3, and then the continue button, all from response 1. I'm going to click save on that. And I'm going to preview this slide. Unfortunately, the tab order works here. Okay, so here I'm going to tab through, and you can see that acing the interview comes up, then the text, then the next piece here. And then I get my buttons, and my buttons actually cycle through in order. And then it's a matter of popping through. And I can see all of the other objects, the menu, the question, even my resources tab, my volume, and then I'm back scrolling around so you can see the actual results. I'm going to click on take a best guess at the answer. Now when I tab, you'll notice that the next thing I tab to is the actual different pieces in my layer. I'm going to close that, and then I'm going to tab here. Now you'll remember I did not fix the order for asking for the second question. If I hit enter here, it opens up the object, and if I hit tab, I go to the one thing that I did move, which is the continue button, and then I start tabbing through the buttons in the bottom layer, and then back to the background, and I start scrolling through all of the other stuff here, and then finally I get back here. This is why tab order is so critical. So make sure that when you are in the tab order that you're setting it up appropriately for the actual order in which things occur, including those things which occur on layers. So that takes care of the tab order for us. And I pop back over to our slide deck here. Again, focus order is really cool. Just make sure you get those layers working properly. Now let's talk about captions. Captions are a bit of a challenge when we start talking about Captivate. Now, one of the things that things that I have to mention here is that the captions are intended for synchronized media. There's a lot of debate as to whether something needs a caption or not. Synchronized media is when there is activity on the screen as well as audio. If there is no activity on the screen, that is, nothing changes on the screen during the duration of the audio, then for a particular slide, then a transcript will be sufficient. In this case, however, captions, we're being told, are supported. Well, then they go on to explain that it's the authors who are using triggers to display caption box synchronized with the media. So it's not really supported. It is actually author control. Captioning is completely and totally up to the author to include. And in our class, we spent a lot more time on closed captioning. But essentially, what you would need to do is you need to create a variable, add a variable. I'm just going to call it CC here, and I'm going to make it a true-false variable, give it an initial value of false and click OK. And then it's going to be a matter of putting in, say, a button here. So I'm going to insert a control, dropping that button right in here, putting CC on it. And I could put some alt text on here as well. And the button trigger then will turn on my closed captioning. So here I'm going to say add trigger. And I currently don't have a layer right now, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust the variable. Which variable? CC. And I'm going to make I'm going to change the value of the variable from false to true. So when I click the variable, click the button, the variable is going to be changed from false to true. And then when I get to, say, this next slide, you'll see I've put a CC layer in here. I'll just pop over to it very quickly. You can see it open right here with all of the different text objects that have been added. And the actual, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go back to my title. I'm going to add a new trigger. And that trigger is going to be to show a layer. And the layer is going to be CC. Basically, when the timeline starts, and that's going to be this timeline, under a specific condition. The condition here is going to be that the variable CC has a value equal to true. And so it will show the layer. So we'll just demonstrate that very quickly. And I'm going to go in here, just preview this scene. Take just a few seconds to ramp up. And I'm going to hit the CC button here. And now when I go next, my closed captions are on. Now, if I go back, I'm going to replay this scene again. I close this. And I'm going to replay the scene again, but this time I'm not going to turn them on, and you'll see that they will not show on the next layer. So once again, to preview, I'm going to say this scene again. I'm not going to click the CC button, but I'm going to go to the next. No closed captions are there. A couple more tools you'll want to throw in here to make your closed captioning more interactive. Have the closed caption button present. Maybe create a light box that has all your tools, your accessibility tools on it. These are just additional options that you can leverage. One last thing I wanted to show you guys, and that was this whole resizing text thing. The resizing text, you can do it. However, in order to do so, one of the ways that I recommend for font sizing is I'm going to go down to one of our slides here. And what I've done is I've taken advantage of the states of the text objects here, or I can take advantage of the state of the text objects. I'm going to grab this state here, edit these states, maybe create a new state called zoom, add that state, and then change the property of this one to 200% of what it is. So in this case, 74 points. And that's going to be the state for this one. And then I'm going to do the same thing for this text here. Edit the state, create a new state, call it zoom, add, and then once again go in and double that size. So I'm going to say 36 for that, and there it is here. And then it's just a matter of creating a trigger. Go back, done editing states here. Creating a trigger which changes the state of both of these objects to 200%. So again, you can use the same idea that we used for the closed captioning, or I can just insert a control button here. Let's just draw that button in here, and I'm just going to say Z for zoom. And once the Z, I'm going to change the state of, in this case, it's going to be the text box to state zoom when the user click button 1. And I'm going to add an additional one for button 1, change the state of text box 2 to zoom when user clicks button 1. And now when I play this particular slide, I have the 200%. Now, I realize this was a whirlwind tour through some of the accessibility options in Storyline, but I'm happy to say that if you follow this and some of the other guidelines that are presented, that we will have the ability to create an actual AA compliant WCAG, WCAG course using Articulate Storyline. Once again, thank you very much, folks, for joining us. If you have any questions at all, please contact us at Eliquo, support@eliquo.ca, and visit online at any one of our courses to register or find out more. Once again, folks, thank you so much for attending, and enjoy the rest of your lunch. Take care now.